Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Hackerlate tutorial. In this episode, we're going to be talking to you about how you can use Hackerlate not just to model the data and create a structure for your data, but also generate synthetic mock data for you. This is something that can be really useful, right? And this is not just us saying this, but we just know that during your development of your system, as you go through the different iterations, as you test the different scenarios, the use cases, and you demonstrate this back to your stakeholders, it's really useful to have fake but representative data inside your data set. Right? You don't want to be using the real identities of your data, right? You don't want to be using real privacy-sensitive data, for example, but you want it to be representative, right? Because that will allow you to explore the edge cases of your application, figure out whether or not the model is actually representative of your use cases, and avoid that you have to spend lots and lots of time creating this type of data manually, because that can be really difficult at scale. Right? So what you're going to do with Hackerlate is basically a two-step process, right? So first, you're going to set it up. You're going to set it up in your model, right? And for each of the attributes that you want to generate fake data for, you're going to have to assign what we call a faker function, right? A faker function leverages the power of a library that is really well known in the industry called faker.js, right? Which allows you to generate this fake but representative data really easily by assigning a function to the attribute for which you want to be generating that data, right? So for every one of these attributes in your data model, you're going to have to create a function like that. Really easy. You can see some examples here on the slide, and we'll go through some of them later on. Now, the second step, of course, is that you generate the actual data, right? And you define the parameters for doing so as you start the generation process, right? There's a lot of examples here. I highly recommend that you take a look at some of our documentation material, right? So on our website, right? But also it links to the Faker documentation and API reference, where for every one of these functions, you can actually see, okay, well, how will I be generating, for example, a full name for a person? Well, it says over here that this is the function that you would have to assign. There's a couple of options that you can assign, but when you include this, faker.person.fullname, and then close the brackets, like this exactly, right? Then, and you include that in your Hackerlate deployment, you will actually be generating full names automatically and representatively using Hackerlate. So you will be able to preview those results. We'll take a look at that a little bit later as well during the short demo. And you can apply this not just to document data, right? So for example, here for JSON documents, but you can also push these generated data elements into a database instance if appropriate, like for example, a MongoDB instance in this particular case. So why don't we take a look at that? Let's go and switch to our demo environment. So I'll start by showing you how you can do this for a JSON document model, right? So this is a document model, a Hackerlate model for JSON documents. I've got two documents included here, right? Persons and addresses, right? They have an ID, first name, last name, address, street, building number, zip, city, country. And what you will see is that for each and every one of these attributes on the right-hand side here, I have assigned a faker function. Right, so first name, it's faker.person.firstname, and then open and close the brackets, right? For a city, for example, it's, as you can see, it's faker.location.city, right? So you can assign all of these functions, in line with what you find here in the API, right? So for every one of these different data types, you have a function, right? If you would want to assign a phone number, okay, then you would assign a function, something like that. Well, but I've already done this here, and now what we can do is we can generate some of these documents by going into our tools, forward engineer JSON documents, right? And then say, well, let's just create the address and the person documents and include, let's say, I don't know, 25, right? 25 documents, 25 instances in that document, right? So now I'm going to say submit, right? And it was going to ask me to choose where to store these, right? So I'll do this over there, right? And then it's going to start generating those documents for me. And that should only take a couple of seconds, and then I can go and open that document for you and take a look at that. Let's switch to that right now. So here we have these documents that have been generated, right? So they're actually in this document, this folder over here. Here's the address.json, here's the person.json, and here you see, right? So 25 examples of the street, Murphy Field, building number, la la la, zip code, city, country, all of these things have been generated. Same thing for the persons, right? You will see that there's real sounding first names and last names over here that have been generated using this Faker library. Note that you can also access this functionality by just double-clicking on the entity, right? And then that will open the JSON preview, and you will see that the Faker function has also generated sample data over here. Same thing for the addresses, right? So if I go back and open the addresses right here and look at the preview, you see that it has generated the appropriate fake data there as well. Great, so that's one example. The other example that I'd love to show you is how you can do something very similar, not for documents, but actually for databases, instances, right? And for that, I'm actually going to use a MongoDB example, right? So I've got a MongoDB instance running in the cloud here. This is MongoDB Compass, and you will see here, I've got a couple of databases here that are up and running, but I'm going to create a new database, a mock database, right? I'm going to create that very similarly to my previous example by saying, okay, I've got addresses and persons here, right? They've got streets, and the Faker functions are right there, right? So what I can do now is I can say, okay, why don't I generate this script, right, and include the sample data, right? And how many samples would I like? Well, let's grab 100, right? 100 documents that I'm going to be generating. And now I'm going to apply that script to my Atlas instance. And you will say, we see it starting to generate the documents, and they will be uploaded to my MongoDB instance automatically as well, right? So now it's generating all the samples, the address samples. You can see the progress happening right there, right? Now everything has been inserted, right? And so now when all of this is done, I can switch to my Compass data environment, right? And see that now, there's a mock database that has been added. There's addresses that have been added, and you can see all the fake data over here, right? The person's same thing. I can see all the fake data that has been added over here, thanks to this process that we just went through in Accolade. Great. So now let's go back to our slides and wrap up this tutorial, because I hope this was a useful example of how you can use Accolade to generate synthetic mock data for your data models. Please take a look at all of our documentation, our blog, the book, everything that we publish on a regular basis. I hope this was useful for you, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day.